I don't know what you guys are watching on the news, who's winning or who's losing. Let me make it pretty simple to you. We lost. We lost in October 7. And there will not be a winning picture here.
اللهم عليك بيهود شل أركانهم ودمر كيانهم اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود التي يتبر فيها ملكهم ويباد فيها أبناؤهم.
We begin with terrifying developments in the Middle East that could change the region forever.
The barrage of rocket fire from Gaza into Israeli territory began just after dawn.
Israel's nightmare scenario, armed Palestinian militants at large in southern Israel.
Hamas is promising to execute Jewish hostages, including women and children, live on the internet.
Israel's military continues to battle Hamas in at least 7 locations 2 days after the militant group launched an unprecedented attack on Israel.
It represents the biggest loss of life in a single day in Israeli history.
I salute Hamas. A job well done.
The only thing that really is remaining standing here at this home is this bomb shelter. And people that lived here took shelter where they thought it was safe. You know, where else would you go? The sirens go off, the rockets are coming, so you go into your bomb shelter, and that was, I believe, part of the plan of the Hamas was to push people into the bomb shelters and then infiltrate with terrorists. And so while they're hiding in the bomb shelter, the terrorists come here and they fire RPGs to burn their house down and then hold them. They don't let them come out of this bomb shelter. So this is, these poor people died here in what they thought was the safety of their bomb shelter. So it was a very, very heavy scene. You get a real sense of how evil, how hard this must be for people to, you know, imagine if you're a neighbor, imagine if you live here and you have to come home and see this. I think you're daily reminded of the severity of this hour.
I remember getting the alerts on October 6th. I was traveling, I was in Nashville, so I was several hours behind here in Israel, and I remember getting the alerts that Hamas was firing rockets at Gaza, and I thought, you know, unfortunately this is business as usual, and Hamas is gonna Hamas. And I put my phone down. I remember putting my phone down and putting my head on my pillow, sleeping for 8 hours, and then waking up half a day deep into the horror that was the massacre of October 7th, reeling in unbelief.
The horror has reached an unimaginable level.
I think the most disconcerting thing was actually waking up to the world of October 8th, a day later.
On October 7th, you saw a lot of people saying pray for Israel and waving Israeli flags. Remarkably, very, very shortly thereafter, hatred like I've never seen before against Israel.
October 8th was a revelation about the world we live in. I think so many of us really thought this is finally going to be a moment when the world gathers and supports, holds up the hands of Israel, because it's obvious that this was an unprovoked attack. It was a massacre against civilians. It was heartless, it was demonic, and the whole world can see that. So obviously the world's going to stand and support Israel like the global community did to the United States right after 9/11. That's going to be this convalescing around them, but that didn't happen.
I could not believe in 24 short hours after the massacre and the kidnappings and the ruthless murders, there were people that were celebrating in the streets around the world, celebrating what Hamas did to the children of Israel.
I thought to myself, I know it's always a little bit different when there's Jews involved, but maybe this will give the world some clarity. Maybe we'll have like a week of just shock and sympathy, and we can kind of grapple with the nature of Islam and the nature of the Hamas charter that has written into the constitution of Hamas. We exist to destroy every Jew everywhere. And then they live it and they act it out, you know? So I thought for sure this will change things, right? And like super naive. And of course it didn't. And we wake up on October 8th to crowds chanting, "Gas the Jews, gas the Jews." gassed the Jews.
We began to see cries for Palestine shall be free from the river to the sea, an all-out call for the extermination of the very people who had just been attacked at their weakest moment. We began to see the world courts making statements against them. We began to see the United Nations refusing to condemn these type of events. And we began to see, I think, the subterranean ancient hatred that has really been below the surface all along, this Jew hatred and this animosity towards Israel that could be dressed up and camouflaged under sophisticated language. All of a sudden now it's just out in the open.
As an American, I only have so many reference points for this kind of targeted scourge and violence. And so the easiest point of reference for us as Americans is 9/11. We remember that Tuesday morning in September. We remember seeing that second plane fly into the second tower and realizing the strategy, that there was planning ahead of this. It was horrific. But there's something very different in the Jewish experience, that generation after generation after generation after generation, going back for centuries and millennia, there's a profound sense of being hunted. And the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 gave a safe haven. Gentiles have said throughout the nations, throughout the years, you can't live amongst us. Even all the way to the Holocaust, saying you can't live at all. And there was like levels of horror that were unpacked on October 7th. You know, the bomb shelters went from places that you would duck out and hide from rockets for 10 minutes. You might have some water, some canned food, like a hurricane kit, just weather it out a little bit. But nobody thought through all of the different ways you could be hunted down and murdered in your own neighborhood. And where I stand now, in this bomb shelter behind me, an 80-year-old woman went from her house to here. She heard the siren, got the red alert notification, and a terrorist saw her cross the street and enter the shelter and hunted her down. And I have to say that I have stood in Dachau, I've stood in Auschwitz, and to stand in the gas chambers and see the claw marks on the walls as people were panicking, realizing they were being killed. But then you come here, and within the boundaries of the State of Israel, an 80-year-old woman is not safe in a bomb shelter. She's hunted down and gunned down while she's crouching for shelter. That's October 7th. And then October 8th, immediately there are protests in the streets, and tens of thousands of Westerners, of people who have the luxury of not being Jewish, are filling the streets, chanting in support of the guy who gunned down the 80-year-old woman in the bomb shelter. So put yourself in the shoes of a Jewish person, and what would it feel like to wake up in the morning and go to bed every night realizing, like, does everybody in the world want us dead? Do we have any friends? Do we have anybody who will fight for our right to be alive?
In the early days after October 7th, the White House press secretary was giving a press conference, and one of the journalists there asked her, "What do you have to say about the rise in anti-Semitic hate crime?" And she said,
we have not seen any credible threats. I know there's been always questions about credible threats, and so just want to make sure that that's out there. But look, Muslim and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks, and certainly President Biden understands that many of our Muslim, Arab Americans and Palestinian American loved ones and neighbors are worried about the hate being directed at their communities.
And because that's something that I'm aware of and something I've studied, I was appalled, as were many people who kind of knew the numbers on that. But even in a normal time, without any kind of conflict that's considered a provocation, anti-Semitism is many orders of magnitude higher in terms of the level of hate crimes than our Islamophobic hate crimes. And so it's just something that people aren't even aware of, but you can go into any statistical base and see that even though the Jewish population in the States is much smaller than the Muslim population, they suffer significantly higher levels of hate crime.
That's the world of October 8th. That's the world we're living in now. And it is a special kind of horrifying, and it provides a very unique opportunity for the church to reevaluate our relationship to Israel and our relationship to the Arab and Muslim world, because I think the Lord let us get away with some things in the world of October 6th that we can't get away with anymore in the world of October 8th, because October 7th was the dividing line.
Israeli perspective regarding evangelical Christians is it's pretty mixed. For those who understand the biblical context and the spiritual context, found during the last 5-6 years that evangelicals are a very strong community supporting Israel. We saw it during the Trump administration mainly, when he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. By the way, when he acknowledged the sovereignty of Israel in the Golan Heights, withdraw from the nuclear agreement with Iran, etc., etc. By the way, and I hope the folks back home will not be insulted, but a lot of Israelis are asking, where are the evangelicals now?
The roads are empty. Where'd they go? They said they love us, but we're going through this whole thing alone, and we're looking at the streets around the world filled with people who hate us and are calling for our demise, that our only safe haven in the world would be formally dismantled. And then where will we go? Where will we live? Where would we raise our children? Because we've tried that before, and we went through pogroms, we went through inquisitions, we went through the Holocaust. Like, this is all we have left. It's Golda Meir saying, we have no place to go. This is our only home.
What does it say about Israel for the future? I don't know. But I can tell you that things will be very, very, very hard after the war. I'm not talking economically, or I'm talking spiritually. Communities will be broken. And this is the time for Christians to stand with Israel.
A church that has said through history, at best, we love you, Israel, we're with you, we stand with you. This is an opportunity to answer the question, okay, well, what does that look like?
There's places now throughout Israel that are like this, that are devastating. There's a real heaviness. There's a sense even earlier today where I was at a home that had been burned down, or here where all these cars have been bombed and burned out, that there's maybe half of my heart that feels like I have a responsibility to stand here and to see this and to take it in and to be able to share the story of what's happened here.
When you enter Auschwitz or the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., or Yad Vashem here in Israel, they always have displays of things that were gathered, collected, confiscated by the Nazis. You have jewelry, gold rings, gold from people's teeth, clothing. And so I just have these recollections, these flashbulb images in my mind. And as soon as I see this stack of charred, burned out cars behind me, these are all collected from October 7th, from the Nova Music Festival massacre, from the kibbutzim roundabout in the Gaza envelope. People were slaughtered in their own vehicles, or their cars were used to generate the fire that would kill them inside their own house. It's horrifying. And this all happened October 7th. By October 8th, there were streets in global cities filling with protesters supporting Hamas and calling them freedom fighters, calling them the resistance movement against the occupation. This is what they mean. When they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what they mean is they want to set everything on fire and kill every Jew and push them out of the way and convert the whole land into Arab only, Muslim only, no Jews. That's the rule, no Jews. That's from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And more than simply saying, no, that's not okay, we have to be able to recognize these patterns in history. It's cyclical, that anti-Semitism is a cog in the wheel of history that just comes round and round and round and round and round again and tests and sifts every generation. And whether or not you believe Jacob's trouble spoken of by the prophets is future or was fulfilled in history, I have my own opinions about that, but it's This is just an issue of human decency. Whether or not you believe the church has replaced Israel, I don't personally hold that conviction. I think Scripture bears a different witness. But even if you think the church has replaced Israel and this, we're kingdom now and things are getting better and better and better, you might have different theological positions than I have. But we can just say, baseline, as humans, this is not okay.
Probably the most significant thing that the church has gotten wrong over the last 2,000 years is in our arrogance as a primarily Gentile church is buying into this lie replacement theology, supersessionism, that we, the church, have somehow replaced Israel.
Some people say that they can hate the Israeli government or they can hate the IDF, but that doesn't mean they hate the Jewish people. Well, unfortunately, so much of what's being propagated on social media today is leading towards hatred.
And it has had massive implications. It's produced persecution of the Jewish people throughout church history, which has then hardened the hearts of Jewish people towards the gospel to where the cross was no longer a symbol of salvation and ransom by the Messiah for the Jewish people and the world, but now it's become a symbol of war. You and I see the cross and we see salvation, we see hope. Jewish people see the cross, they're reminded of the pogroms, they're reminded of the Holocaust, they're reminded of the Inquisition, they're reminded of being kicked out of nations. And it's important for us to know that for us, Israel is God's eternal test.
Invariably, anytime you say, Israel, we're with you, somebody somewhere next to you or on social media or whatever, immediately, okay, well, what about the Palestinians? Now, you know that you've nationalized the gospel when you start prioritizing people groups. And if you build a border and a boundary and say anybody in this border and boundary gets to have the good news, but anybody outside of it who I don't like, I don't have to give it to them. That's nationalism. And it's not helpful here in the Middle East. It's not helpful in America. It's not helpful with the Nazis. It's not helpful anywhere. Nationalism is antithetical to the gospel witness. And here's where the church has a unique opportunity to speak into this in a faithful way, because we have pledged allegiance to the slaughtered, crucified, resurrected, risen, ascended King who will soon restore the kingdom to Israel, who said to Joshua in Joshua 5, just outside of Jericho, he's like, I'm not answering the question about if I'm for you or against you or whose side I'm on. I am the line. And there's a narrow road of truth that we walk on when we take up our cross and follow the crucified one. And so we can say to the Palestinians, look, there is an ironclad commitment that the Lord has to these three provisions of the everlasting covenant. There's seed, land, and blessing. So the Lord can say to Abraham, through your seed, I can rescue mankind. Through this land that I'm allocating to you and your children, I can restore created order that was lost in the fall. And I'm going to do this in a way that actually blesses all nations. If the Lord had stopped at seed and land, that's a nationalized gospel. And it would be appropriate then to prioritize one people group. But because the Lord secured blessing to all nations through this seed and through this land to all nations, we can say to the people in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon and Syria and the Arab world, the Muslim world, Europe, I'm an American with every nation in my bloodline except for Israel. Like a Gentile mutt like me, there's good news for the Gentile mutts because the Lord has it in his heart and his eternal purposes to bless all nations through what Jesus called very specifically this gospel of the kingdom. And if we want to love and serve Palestinians, which we should do, we have to give them the gospel of the kingdom. If we stay faithful to that message, we can actually represent that dividing line that says to Palestinians, there is a way out of a world of war, but you have to bend the knee to the crucified one.
We're here in Nativ HaSara. This is the closest village to Gaza. I think maybe the distance between the closest house here and the closest house in Gaza might be like 4 football fields or something like this. It's, not far at all. And this was established by, I believe, 51 families. It's now grown to about 300. And you can see this wall behind me. This wall kind of carried the hopes and dreams of the people of this village, which is that there would be a peaceful coexistence with the people who live in Gaza just across that wall behind me. And this monument here is a tribute to that, to this idea, this hope, this dream of there being a path to peace. And tourists like myself have come here before, and you take a tile and you would glue it, to the wall to symbolize your desire to join with the people of this village to hope and pray for peace between Israel and Gaza. And of course, those hopes and dreams were shattered around 6:30 in the morning on October 7th, 2023. We've heard artillery dropping here, we hear gunfire, we hear a drone overhead. You can see contrails of flights being flown over here. There's a lot of activity here. You can hear going on right now as we're filming. So it's still a very active war. They don't know exactly how many terrorists came in, somewhere between, I think there's 3 to 10 came in paragliders, and on their way in, they started to drop rockets on, there's a communication camera tower with a gun on it, and then at the same time, they started launching rockets here. I don't know how many rockets landed here in this village. I think they were mostly being shot into Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Tel Aviv. But also at the same time, these terrorists, they bombed the fence, I think a kilometer or so to the west, and made their way here into the village, and about 20 people were killed here. And so it's very in your face. This is as close as you can get. This is the closest village to Gaza, and they paid a heavy price on October 7th.
I'm living for the day that we live in a world that does not have war. It's one of the most beautiful promises in the scriptures, and the prophets say that when the Lord is reigning from Zion, that the nations will learn war no more. The problem is we're learning it now, and we're getting pretty good at it. And so we invent all of these different ways to attack and torture. What happened on October 7th was just like getting a glimpse into the deepest pit of hell. It was dark and profane and wicked and evil. It doesn't matter whose side you're on or who committed the atrocities. It was wicked and evil, and we should be able to very easily and quickly condemn what was done on October 7th. But the fact that the nations have had a difficult time simply condemning what took place tells me that October 7th was not just a revelation on what Israel's enemies are willing to do and excited to do. It's actually a glimpse into what the nations are willing to participate in and willing to condone. And that's terrifying.
I'm reminded of the story in the book of Kings where Elisha's servant walked out of the tent and saw Israel's enemies surrounding them. He said to Elisha, "What are we going to do?" And Elisha said, "Those that are with us are greater than those that are with them." And Elisha just prayed a simple prayer, "Lord, open his eyes that he might see." And when his eyes were opened, he saw that the armies of God were so much greater and surrounded them. And today it's my prayer that Israel's eyes would be open to see that though they're surrounded by enemies on every side, on every border, the armies of God are there ready and willing to stand with Israel. The God who keeps Israel, the Psalms says, never slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is their protector. So may their eyes be opened even in this season of supernatural hatred. May they see the armies of God surrounding them and covering them and watching over them.
In our commitment to be a good brother, we have to be able to look at Israel and go, look, whatever this looks like, whatever you go through, however this evolves, we are in this thing with you. And the thing that prevents us from nationalizing the gospel is that we say to Israel's enemies, we're going to love you with a Calvary love. We're going to love you with the love that lays down its life for its enemies. So we have friendship and solidarity, not only with Israel, and not only a brotherhood that we commit to stand with Israel in these days, but also to serve and sacrificially love the Arab and Muslim world. One thing I've seen in 10 plus years living and working in the Middle East is there's this weird thing that happens where people are either so pro-Israel they become anti-Arab, or often, and we see this throughout, aid organizations in the Middle East, that you become so endeared to your Arab neighbors, your Muslim neighbors, that you actually adopt Arab anti-Israel animosity And that's fine if you don't confess the name and lordship of Jesus, but if you do, you have to be a person of the cross. This is what Jihadi John called us in his execution video of the 21 Coptic martyrs on the Libyan shore. He called us the people of the cross, and that is actually the witness that we have to give to the Arab and Muslim world. We don't get to nationalize the gospel and just give it to people that we like, or white knuckle it to ourselves because we want to stay in safety. We have to actually bear witness, incarnate witness to the incarnate word of the Jesus of the cross, who reconciles us to God, who will, in the resurrection, lead us into the restoration of all things. That's our message. That's that Maranatha cry. Come, Lord Jesus, and lead us into a world that does not learn war anymore.